Okay, so maybe we get going now. It's about 1 p.m. So we have apparently some 30 people online and some 20 here. So it's a good start. So welcome to the community update. And let's hope the technology will be with us this time. It hasn't always been exactly perfect. So this happens twice a semester, and we'll typically do it after the board meeting, so to update the community about also what happened at the board. But this time around, let's keep everything very short otherwise, and try to focus on the discussion on the IAB report. And I'll sort of go through a couple of updates first, and then Annika says something about the budget for the genomics and bioinformatics, and the vision and mission is actually related to the IAB report, and the National Research Profile concept is also related to the IAB report. So I'll do those first before getting into the IAB report. And the IAB report, let's just discuss. What do you think? What is out there important from your perspective? So I do this quarterly update to the board, and it's sort of the operations office helps me with this, and it's always a very narrow snapshot as to what has happened. This was also a very early on board meeting just before the summer, but there's a lot of things that actually have happened. Most important actually, just for general information, is that we now have all the legal documents formally approved that form the basis of SciLifeLab operations. So we are in a sense legally operating now, and that's also thanks to everybody involved. There's a bunch of activities going on and upcoming, and I'll just give a couple of quick vignettes of these things. Facility Forum, which Annika has been co-organizing, is really meant for the facilities to come together and try to build synergies across their operations and compare their notes. Lots of news have happened, and this is, I'm not going to go through this. I quickly presented them to the board, and again, these are just like vignettes about what has happened over the past couple of months since the previous board meeting. What I would like to point out now, and just put this date on your agendas, December 11th is the day when the Science and SciLifeLab Prize event will be held. And as you know, this is an annual event that was started 5 years ago by Matthias as a director in those days. And now this is a 5-year celebration event. And we were lucky to draw some extra support from KAV to organize a much bigger event this time around, which will happen in the Aula Medica on December 11th. Where we also have the past prize winners present, and we'll have the prize winners lectures there. And Edvard Moses is representing the KAV board, and we'll have a lecture of some sort. And this is what I would really encourage you to be there, because it would be great to fill the Aula Medica, or at least fill it to some extent. So be there if you just can. A couple of notes on sort of calls for meeting support and facility support. So contact Mikaela or Elina if you are interested in running a meeting or running a course. This is a new organization, how this will be done. For instance, the Science Summit is open in terms of what will be the next topic for it. So this is your opportunity to ask for SciLifeLab to support meetings, and better do it now and not just ask whenever you organize it. Otherwise, that can SciLifeLab come and co-sponsor your support? That's often not then really possible. So with that, I'll shift to Annika now on a couple of quick points about the budget for 2 facilities.
So can you hear me? Thank you. So at the board meeting, the board approved funding for the SciLifeLab Genomics platform for 2018. And this was a little bit less than last year, for 4.5 million, and given as a whole to the entire platform to be divided by the present management based on strategies. In addition, the board also approved a process for recruiting a new management, and this was suggested by the MG, and this has been discussed a lot with the facility directors. So there will be an internal search and a nomination for new management, a director and a co-director, and this will happen now during the autumn, and they will probably start around mid 2018. And also, there was approved funding for the SciLifeLab bioinformatics platform, and this was actually exactly in line with this year funding that was given to NBIS, the present bioinformatics platform. But altogether, an increased support to SciLifeLab bioinformatics was approved, and the extra funding would then go to a central new center, or actually an expansion of the data office that we have informed about previously. So this is now suggested to be called the SciLifeLab Data Center, and the primary objective of this would be to maximize the impact of data generated by the SciLifeLab platforms, whereas NBIS, as all the other platforms, are providing collaborative service to users, to end users. So those are sort of the differences. And these two units will, of course, collaborate a lot, and there has already been discussions with Bengt and Johan Rung about that. So this was all.
Okay, thank you. So maybe just one add-on to the genomics and bioinformatics that people may be wondering, why did we give only 1 year a budget? All the facilities essentially are approved on a 2+2 year cycle. And this is now 1 year funding that makes genomics and bioinformatics to match with the schedule of all of the other ones. So we'll have a midterm checkup. And then the expectation obviously is, so in one way, even though it's not really going to be written down as budgets for 2019 and 20, the expectation is that that is the case. So we are committed to long-term funding of both genomics and bioinformatics. So that is a fact and certain issue. Okay, so now before we go to the IAB, I'll sort of point to a couple of issues, and one is that we had a discussion and an approval of a mission and vision statements of SciLifeLab during the board meeting, and this actually follows the fact that we prepared for the board a suggestion of a vision and mission statement. And it turned out that they liked it so much that it was like, please do go ahead and work on it. And this is actually important for the concept that the board is, sorry, not the board, the IAB is suggesting that SciLifeLab profile should really be both an infrastructure center and a research effort. And obviously that's how things have been, but it's a constant kind of a balancing act as to how SciLifeLab balances the infrastructure part and the research collaborative activities. And this is the vision and mission as it was presented and suggested to the IAB and now subsequently dealt with at the board. So we suggest that SciLifeLab is a national hub for molecular life sciences, and this is kind of following the government's expectations that this is a national infrastructure player, but we should also consider it as a national role otherwise in molecular life sciences, and that is a taller order than just acting as a national infrastructure site. And that our mission, and this is building upon the previous statements, is to be providing infrastructures, but also facilitating international leading collaborative research in a community of excellent scientists. So this wording has really been chosen to represent the fact that we have high ambitions in the scientific side. And obviously the government, as well as most of us, also want to translate things to society benefits. So this links to what the IAB is also suggesting on a number of these issues. The other thing, which is this SciLifeLab National Research Profile, so this is something where we really want to engage and discuss with you. These are very early plans, only suggestions, so nothing has really been decided about this National Research Profile concept. We sometimes have talked about national research programs, but I think the word profile is maybe a better word than an actual program. And you may ask as to why do we need such a thing? And one is, and these also link very much to the IAB suggestion, one is to build a global brand and profile for SciLifeLab. We cannot really be a global player if we are a national infrastructure player, although we do contribute to a global aspects in that way as well. And to get a better integration of the infrastructure and the research, and this is easy to say but difficult to sort of reach in practice. Connecting people, developing a community, I think this is something that we would really like to promote, that we would have an active community, and it's difficult to promote a community of 1,200 people, but if we could build smaller entities there, this could maybe work better. One thing that has always been a little unclear is the faculty definition. And I'm not saying that we are now going to fix it overnight. This will be a long process, and we need to do this carefully. But I would suggest that in the long run, we would have really two types of faculty: those who are playing a role in the infrastructures, and then those that are connected to some kind of a research profile. And that's obviously today, it's as you know, different in Stockholm, different in Uppsala and so forth, and it's not something that we should change overnight, but this could, the research profiling effort could help in defining this. This could also help define priority areas, so currently it's a little difficult to say when people ask what is SciLifeLab really doing research on, and we can pinpoint here and there, but we don't really have a clear definition of the research priorities. And you could say that do we even need one? But yeah, but if we are also a research establishment that should have some nominated research areas, and for instance, this could in the future be important to define the areas where fellows, for instance, are recruited. This is then potentially important also for the national infrastructures, that if we have a community of active users and active contributors, they could help us to develop the infrastructures also going forward. We could explore new avenues. There are suggestions now in the IAB report that please pay more attention to non-biomedical research, for instance. They say please pay attention to clinical research. So how would we do this? Well, one way to do it is maybe open up an opportunity for a research profile to be created in these efforts. And overall, SciLifeLab is, like the vision statement was about the hub. It's a collaborative site, so we really are all about collaboration and having this research effort that could bridge different institutions and have an impact on different universities and also society and internationally is really important for this. And I'm not now going through this in detail, but these are some of the words that the IAB made recommendations that clearly point us that please do something about this area. So we feel that we have an obligation now to at least explore this and try to push this research profiling effort forward. So having the kind of a research infrastructure connection, this should engage the nation as a whole, not just be local, but we also need to be concerned about how we profile the research locally. They suggest that this should be a bottom-up call, so let's the community organize itself rather than we telling top-down as to how it should happen. Maybe there needs to be some element of both. and also that some specific areas could be engaged. So how to do this? And as I said, this is only suggestions, and we would very much welcome your input on this. That let's organize it in a bottom-up process, and what we could do is to first just explore ideas. To have a very sort of a simple process to get this going. Ask for expressions of interest and ideas. And also we need to then define what do we expect from these things. So it should be reciprocally beneficial to SciLifeLab, but also beneficial to the participants. It should be really anchored on the SciLifeLab infrastructure. So this is not meant to be research on anything that doesn't really make use of SciLifeLab infrastructures and doesn't sort of contribute and benefit SciLifeLab infrastructures. So anchoring it there, ideally it should involve multiple PIs, multiple departments, multiple universities to be really sort of a broad and national. And like the IAB suggests that the fellows should be the key components of this. They should maybe be active in this aspect as well. And certainly it should not just be scientists, it should be linked and closely involving the infrastructure experts, because that's the basis of the SciLifeLab national existence. And we are still debating, and these are just early ideas, and I'm not going to go through this. What could we offer to these people? Because we are not having a major funding available for launching national research profiles similar to the VR, having 100 million profiles for many years. This is not going to be a major funding effort. What we could provide is to help people coordinate themselves. And obviously this may be more beneficial to some areas than others. This is certainly good for team science. But if you are an individual PI, maybe you're not that interested in these collaborative benefits. This could sort of have some kind of a collaborative access to national infrastructures that is preferential. That's what the IAP recommendations also state, but it's very politically difficult because we obviously have used to the fact that access is equal to everybody. As I said, faculty status could somehow be linked to this in the future, also maybe in a local sense. How we utilize the space in the alpha gamma could be linked to the but these need separate decisions. These are only suggestions at the moment. But then we should also have expectations. So what do we expect from the people who would be part of the research profiles? That they could contribute to a high research profile, but do it in a collaborative setting, and participate also in the collaborations and kind of a infrastructure, promoting the infrastructure on SciLifeLab. And overall create and contribute to the community. I think we tend to have a little issue with the feeling of community here at SciLifeLab, and maybe this could be something that the profiles could contribute to. So before I now switch over to the IAB, maybe we could have a little discussion on the research profiling aspect, and then I suggest that we just sort of go through the IAB document as there were 42 suggestions in the IAB that IAB gave to us. The most critical ones are actually linked to the research profiling aspects. The IAB was, in my mind, fairly positive about the developments in infrastructure, and we are a lot more organized there. But it's the future of SciLifeLab research that they are really interested in. They want to be engaged with us in planning that going forward. But the initiative should really come from us. So maybe just open it up for comments if you have any. Let's use the microphone before you start speaking, so the people on the other side will hear as well.
Is this on? Yes, it is. I think it's a very good idea to focus on how to integrate research and infrastructures. That everything that we do here is to build stronger infrastructures. We shall promote research that contributes to stronger infrastructures, because that is what will pay off in the long run, and also put SciLifeLab on the international map.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Other points?
I mean, it's always a good thing to integrate the research, but it's always like to integrate without actually having any significant funding is very hard, because like we all write research proposals that get funded sometimes not, and sometimes we try to figure out whatever people want, and we try to fit ourselves into whatever profile we think has high chance to get funding. So then, and many times it's actually a bit, I mean, it's top down, so it's very much we try to figure out whatever we want, can get funding for, and we do that. And it's really to have it from a bottom-up perspective is much more difficult. And honestly, it's very, very bad participation in seminars across the houses here and things like that. It's really, if you look at the PhD students, I had a group, most presentations, and some of the PIs had a presentation at the same time, and the people walk out in the middle of the seminar because they're not interested. And these things really, it's not a, it has to be built up of a scientific interest somehow, and that doesn't seem to exist. I don't know really how to build it up, but we really need to have more interest in general questions somehow together. And I'm not sure if funding is the way to do it. I don't know. It's I don't know. A big common coffee hour or something might be more productive. I don't know.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that it's sort of there are issues to this that are local, also that how to build the Stockholm community. And then there's the thing that we also need to be concerned that the government wants us to be national. So we need to balance these two things up, and in a way there is a local aspect to the research programs or profiles, and there's a national aspect to the research profiles. And I share your point that we should somehow have these communities engaged. I mean, we are not funding them, so why should they be engaged? They just do their own things and then they walk out. But if we are to build a critical mass and to be at the world edge, something needs to be different. And therefore this is in a way a big change, and therefore we cannot just do it like this. This really needs everybody's ideas and thoughts, and we need to plan this carefully, and obviously we're not going to do it just overnight. This is a big effort, but it's needed in my mind. Lars.
A follow-up on that could be, I mean, is there in the plans already to discuss with, for example, VR with SciLife about the funding schemes that are laid forth by the government in strategic areas, and that way you could, together with them, develop something that would be not only of local and national interest, but also have a good possibility for funding, and then it could advantage the research groups in that way as well.
Yeah, so that is obviously what the IAB suggested as well, that bees engage with the VR and CoAV and so forth. And I think there is certainly some areas where this could be sort of important, but it's also that every funding agency wants to run their own show. And it's very difficult to come and say, well, we have this consortium set up and please fund it. I mean, that's difficult in that sense. So yeah, I think we need to consider particularly how we line up the infrastructures and link them up with the programs that they support. That's one thing. But then maybe also, and that's more doable in a way, that how would our infrastructure support the Grand Challenge initiatives that VR and others are funding? I think that is a doable thing, and we need to maybe have a concerted effort on that. But then to have our community match with the expected funding opportunities arising, that's more difficult. But it certainly doesn't hurt to talk, it doesn't hurt to show the way in a way that we think this is important, this is where we put our efforts and interest and so forth. So I think that will be very, very helpful, but we need to have them first. Yes.
Since KI now has a new vice chancellor, what possibilities do you see to improve the relationship with KI?
Well, I see a lot of possibilities there, but sort of maybe that is a more specific KI discussion. The particular thing that, if I now restrict this discussion to the research profile and to the IAP report, and that is the clinical research. I mean, there was a suggestion that SciLifeLab should be more engaged in the clinical research, and I think we do a lot of that in genomics, we do a lot of that in other fields as well, but it's not profiled well enough so that for instance, IAP probably didn't get it. And then the other thing that links to this KI and the profiling effort, that to the outside we appear closed. We appear as a closed community because there hasn't been a way to really, obviously anybody can access the infrastructure, but if we had a collaborative effort and opening, we could perhaps engage a lot wider community of clinical scientists, for instance, to collaborate with SciLifeLab. And in that sense, I see this research profiling effort a great way of engaging potential users, potential bigger communities in a more systematic way than we would today have. But I certainly have high hopes to collaborate with Ulla-Petter Ottesen. I mean, he's certainly likely to change a lot of things at KI. I should say that for the political purpose, I should say that for every university. Anything else? So I sense that at least there's some support to the idea that we should do something, but it's probably the same thing that you are thinking as we are thinking in the MG, that how the heck should we push this forward? And that is really the key thing. If you sort of come up with ideas or suggestions, again, send it to the MG and we consider it. But you will hear more about this planning now in the future in any case, because I think we do need to do something about it. But this needs to be done in close collaboration with the host universities, because this is not the SciLifeLab management or the board that defines these priorities, but we'll do it. And we'll engage the host universities in this process for sure. Okay, so if nothing else now on this one, so let me turn to the rest of the time. We have about half an hour. So let's go through the IAP document, or not the document as such, but the recommendation specifically. And I'll put one thing about the time scale here. So we had a board discussion. This just appeared before the board meeting, literally 1 week before the board meeting, when this finally came together. So this is a long overdue document. And as you see from the document, if you have read it, it's a very detailed document. So our advisors are strongly committed to helping SciLifeLab going forward. Some people think that they're a little too committed to do so. But that's sort of an issue that we can debate, because they are advisory in nature in any case. They are not dictating how things go forward. Well, we were discussing within the management group about this last week. We released this now internally to the SciLifeLab community on last week. Now we have this discussion here. We'll have other discussions as well. The rectors wanted to really carefully plan the release of the document so that this goes out to the government and then subsequently publicly released, but we'll put some comments, add comments to this document and reflecting maybe some of the concerns that there are, that this is a document that we cannot fully engage just like that. There are legal and other limitations to how to do it. And then the board, in its meeting, we hoped that we would have actually got a lot of comments on the board of push forward this one, push forward that one, but they said that please prepare us for the next meeting a list of agenda items on what we should go forward with. And now you may ask us, why the heck is this? Why don't you just start executing these suggestions and plan forward like this? But again, let's remind ourselves as to how we are engaged in a complex organization. So we have the board that is having a decision on the national funding, but then we have the SFO funding that is located in the universities. So we have 4 bodies that control the SFO budget. We have the national budget controlled by another body, and we in the management group need to always engage with all of these 5 entities that control SciLifeLab funding. But it's not even that simple. We have the rectors who also, I should say, for a positive sense, they are very engaged. We meet regularly with the rectors, but they have their own views on things. And then there is, for the local things, the Campus Solna committee that is particularly concerned with the space arrangements and any other local arrangements. And as the IAB also pointed out, a lot of our management actually happens in the host departments at the 4 primary host universities. So this is an enormously complicated thing then to say how we should go forward in executing the recommendations. I think for the most part, the IAP recommendations are very excellent. They point out to a lot of good things, but they also don't really fully understand the complexity of the environment where we are working on. So now I have just a list of these 42 recommendations, and I did not plan this, that I'm reading them through. I hope that you have at least looked at them, and we can maybe point out to a couple of these things for the discussion. So I would rather like this to be interactive. So if we look at this page, for instance, pick up a suggestion that you feel strongly about and you think that something should be done with this thing. This is divided in a way that there's a global context, challenges facing SciLifeLab, governance and structure. Then there is a platform and infrastructure part. Then there is a research part, which particularly deals with the research profiling part. Separate section on non-medical life science. There are many recommendations about the fellows. So fellows have been really at the center of, and we have at least one fellow present here representing the community. The concept of SciLifeLab faculty, they came up with the idea that they really want to promote or engage us in research integrity issues. Obviously, this has some relationship to a neighboring university and issues related there. Human resources, some branding related questions, innovation and industrial collaborations that they would like us to promote, a recommendation on clinical collaboration, and then most importantly, they very clearly indicate that we are going to be back. And in 2 years, all these questions will be asked from us again. So we need to either act on them or have very good reasons not to act on them. But we will face this. We can't just brush them aside totally like that would be the easiest thing to say, well, we don't like that recommendation. We have to justify why we don't like that or why we would not act on this. So in that sense, I feel at least that we should look at them seriously. We should consider them and see how they could help to improve SciLifeLab. So that was my sort of a pre-words to this discussion. So should we sort of maybe take this page? Oh, not this page. Sorry, went too far. Am I going the wrong direction here? Sorry. Let's move forward. Now, so global context. That's probably nothing spectacular. This we already discussed, that the IAB would like infrastructure and research to coexist, that there should be increased coordination between the universities at department level. And I think this is an interesting and very worthwhile recommendation. But what do we have? 20-something departments that are associated with SciLifeLab, so it's not very easy to engage them. Some of them have a lot of activities at SciLifeLab, but others have 1 or 2 scientists, so they are not going to be as engaged as others. But this is certainly something that we probably would like to work on. They also suggest that maybe KTH should have a more sort of a prominent role in approving legal documents and others, but this is not easy to get the rectors agree on these things. So at the most we could consider that we would have one SciLifeLab wide pre-approved CDA where what people could use, but everything else I think we will continue to have to circulate all the agreements across the multiple host universities if multiple host universities are involved in some collaborations. But maybe this is not something that we need to spend time on, these governance related things. That's more up to the rectors and the host universities. But maybe I'll advance now to this platform thing. Yeah, sure. Of course.
I really think that the SFO funding should somehow be coordinated at the. I think it's unclear how even next round of SciLifeLab fellows will come. Will that be coordinated? I'm sure there are different policies how the SFO funding is used at different universities and so on. And it's significant about the SciLifeLab fellow money, and it's probably also clear to have. Would be good to have that. Also for a 2, 3, 4, 5 year budget plan, so people are aware of it. And I guess that that's the money that's useful for research. It has to be, and I think there has been, at least at Stockholm University, there's been too much of small money here and there, like small. We have a few million extra, and we go hire a postdoc in some random research council way where people locally can apply, and there's not been any strategical thoughts about it.
Sure.
So that's I think something that the government thinks that needs a bit coordination better.
I think you're absolutely right, and this is fully what we think as well, and it's also something that we've already, with the organization change, have tried to change, but it's not easy to sort of just overnight write it up. But maybe if Matthias, you want to say something about the coordination with the SFO, because the whole point is that we have now 4 SFO SciLifeLab committees, and we are starting to have joint meetings. But this is just the beginning of it. But it's a long process, and you can maybe reflect your past experience on this as well.
Well, obviously SciLifeLab has gone through an amazing development. Right now, the total funding to the affiliated faculty is about 1.3 billion Swedish, which is every year. Out of that, about approximately 20% is infrastructure funding. I think on the infrastructure side, we have an enormous responsibility to the rest of Sweden, since basically the VR infrastructure funding is almost collapsing as we speak. So I think it's very, very important that we keep the infrastructure funding for life science and make it as a national priority. When it comes to the SFO, I think it's extremely important that the universities, our host universities, are very much involved in SciLifeLab. And therefore, I am very, very happy with the fact that we have funding from different sources. I think all of us in this room are very used to having funding from different sources, and we deal with them separately. So if we have funding from VR, we deal it that way. If we have funding from KAV, we deal it that way. So I think it is a strength that we're having funding from the universities and also funding for creating national infrastructure. So I don't see that as a problem at all. As a matter of fact, I think it's a strength. And I think it's amazing that we have 1.3 billion in overall total funding to the SciLifeLab community. So basically, I am a little bit concerned that we try to put these sort of things from different sources into one pot. I think it's the wrong idea, basically. I think we should just see it as one way of getting funding from different sources and really try to make the universities involved in what we are doing. And I think the best way to do that is to have the SFO funding coming from the universities.
Well, there is in any case now a better chance to get the universities to collaborate as well, because that's the whole point, that this should be a collaborative hub. This should not only be 4 separate university funding pots. So I do think that there's still an opportunity to make more of that SFO funding. And we see that in like the fellows issues, that it's been a little difficult to build a coherent fellows program with the critical mass if we have not had a clear plan. So one suggestion that the rectors actually had, that they would like to develop their own plan for SciLifeLab. And I think that's really good along the lines of what Matthias was saying, that they would be more engaged. And that's what we have been missing, that the university haven't really formally committed as to what are they going to do with SciLifeLab. Now a fellow...
Just a quick comment. I don't think that the sort of lack of scientific vision for recruiting, so all, I think, of us actually valued the fact that there was not a very targeted advertisement, so that they were sort of open for hiring, you know, the best people rather than someone who fits into a certain scheme that, you know, a group of people has sort of envisioned, and that's, I think, good to get, like, you know, the best people with the newest also technology. But I think the problems were, you know, from in other places, like integrating us here, space-wise as well as community-wise. Yeah.
Sure.
And one thing I mean, maybe the saddest thing is that somehow our meetings with, which actually many of you participated in the beginning, the PI meeting was somehow stranded in, like, doesn't happen anymore. I don't know exactly what was the reason for discontinuing it, but this was actually one of the few platforms where I sort of, you know, saw most of you actually on a regular basis, which doesn't happen anymore since about a year.
Yeah. Well, we definitely need to keep that up, but that's a local SciLifeLab issue in Stockholm now. So remember that this is also a national discussion that we are having here. So we shouldn't sort of delve only on Stockholm issues today.
Just a very short thing, that the rules for the SciLifeLab fellows, at least it's going to be hired as biträdande lector. It's going to change from January 1st or whatever next year. So you're going to have to be younger and you're going to stay longer. So you have the maximum 5 years from a PhD. So that it's going to affect, we're going to have, people going to be here longer, so we're going to have fewer of them, and it's going to be hired at a more junior stage. So that is something we have to take into account.
Sure. Yeah, this is related to the government rules for tenure track that are coming up. And that's one aspect that links also to our response to the SciLifeLab Fellows issues, that this is the upcoming change. In the interest of time, maybe go through now a little bit the platform issue. So Annika, you want to sort of say something about what you thought when you read these comments on the platforms, and what kinds of issues would you like to get from the community here?
I mean, you have already alluded to that they, in general, they were very happy with the development of the platforms. And they didn't take part in that much of presentations from the platform this time either. They were focusing on other things. They had some special review on the bioinformatics platform. I don't know, Bengt, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah. I have a few comments. We are of course happy for the good input from IAB on the bioinformatics platform. And also, of course, we're happy on the item 13 there, that we need long-term commitment. What's important to think about also when we come to data, which is probably not completely clear for IAB, and you have to discuss if you want to have a note on that, is that in Sweden, it is the university or the PI who owns the data. So what we can do from SciLife is, of course, to provide an environment where it's easy to store the data, easy to share the data, but we cannot force the scientists to share data unless we have it coupled to some of the programs, like the national program now in its third round. Then there will be some items about that you need to share data if you use SciLife equipment and so on. So that's of course a political thing that need to be very clearly announced. And we help as much as we can from the bioinformatics platform and the data office to create those systems to enable data sharing, and that's also something going on internationally. Another thing also is this point 9, where they say quite strongly in the AIB that they want the platforms to be more tightened to SciLifeLab. And some of the platforms are also national infrastructures with a lot of support from other universities. And SciLifeLab is only Stockholm and Uppsala universities. So I think there might be a risk if Gothenburg University should give money to SciLifeLab, they might be less willing to do that compared to give money to a national infrastructure, which they're part of. So you need to think very carefully there so that we don't cut off any funding streams in order to make this organizational view clearer. And I think both NDI and NBIS works quite nice today with support from many universities and that way, but it's something to think about. And again, this with data will be a big challenge for the near future. And there you also probably know about that SciLife is running 2 platforms now with a technical model that SUNET has developed to do storage. And hopefully that will work out quite nicely, and that will be discussed more in detail with universities this autumn to hopefully be launched next year.
Yeah, absolutely. The data is a big issue. Data handling is not really covered much in the IAB recommendation, but this is one of these things that we need to do a lot of work in any case. They do point to the hardware part at the end, that we should really have a plan for the hardware, and that actually goes along with all of the other instrumentation upgrades that are more and more pressing for the same reason that Matthias said about VR running out of infrastructure funding. It's also the KAV not using their funding anymore for equipment that much, so that may be more difficult in the future as well to use that as a funding source. So we have multiple challenges in this respect, that co-funding from other places is going down. But you're right in terms of what's the branding effort here. So how much should we be promoting platforms in platform-specific brands versus SciLife overall brand? Because we do also need understanding that SciLifeLab has a big role in supporting national platforms. But if the SciLifeLab name is not even mentioned in many of these, that's how the IAB comment came to be, that many of the presentations were from the platforms which were branded in a way that was not connected to the SciLifeLab. So I think that's where this idea came from. It has obviously links to the history, and it has a historical base why you do it the way that you do, and there's the co-funding policies that we need to be concerned about. But then the flip side of the coin is that we should also promote the SciLifeLab as a common brand name for everything that we support.
So I very much support point 13 to 16 from the IAB about the bioinformatics and the need. As a matter of fact, I think the future of SciLifeLab depends on how good we will be in providing national support for bioinformatics and system biology in the future. When it comes to point 15, I think it's very. I agree, of course, with the first sentence, but I also think that it's important to remember that the Wallenberg Foundation has given us more than 500 million of Swedish crowns already, and that I don't think that we should depend on their support in the future. I mean, I think it would be very nice if we can get support, but we have to have plans that actually is independent of external support from, for example, Wallenberg Foundation, because this is so important. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't have an application to Wallenberg. Obviously we should, but we also have to plan what happens if we don't get funding from Wallenberg.
Well, this is absolutely true. Also, the bioinformatics, as I said, there's a strong commitment for the 4-year planning, and we didn't present it today, but this will be presented in the future as to what are the plans for an upgraded data center. So we decided to rename the data office to become a data center. And the idea is really to promote a data-centric view of SciLifeLab operations for a number of reasons. This is really where life science is going, and this is really where we can have an impact, because this is not something that is coordinated currently, and many of the users of our platforms, they come and go, and we have really very little understanding though, that, like Bengt said, that we don't own the data, that the scientists own the data, but we can still help and coordinate, and we could expect them to provide. I mean, that's a general expectation for every data produced these days, that you should make it available. So therefore, we should have an expectation from SciLifeLab platforms that the data produced should also be made generally available. We only have a couple of minutes now left, so maybe we skip the rest of the platform, but this is really one of the most important things. Also point out that drug discovery, well, they'll pick up, IAB will pick up certain issues for further discussion, and clearly drug discovery will be something that they want to discuss in the future. Research, well, we discussed the research profiling effort, and this is really what the IAB would like us to do. We, as said, we don't have dedicated major funding to devote to this one, but we can at least try to promote the community build-up locally as well as nationally. And importantly, we've looked at the research profile today at SciLifeLab, and it's very biomedical in nature, and obviously they do want us to make sure that other life science areas like environment and agriculture and so forth will be sort of receiving their share, and this is one way that we could promote it, to open up whatever that research profiling effort would be. So this is something that we will continue to discuss quite a bit. Fellows, so you want to say what the fellows' thoughts are in 2 minutes about the recommendations and action, because we certainly have tried to already do some of these things. Not all of them are in our disposal, because they go back to the departments, they go back to the things that we have 4 host universities involved, and they have their own regulations and thoughts. But get the mic to. Sorry that we put you on a spot for a fellows spokesperson now.
I mean, you know, of course, we all of them we think are very good propositions, and we understand that some are very far-reaching, and you know, also understand that, you know, some of them may be unrealistic based on how this is set up versus, you know, the EMBL or something is set up. I think the iPod thing is a very good idea. I think that is perfectly feasible. I guess the funding is, of course, always a question. You know, and of course, we would like to see some of them realized in some way or the other. I mean, hopefully, you know, not everything is just sort of rejected based on we have different policies here than at EMBL, because ultimately these are, I think we have to acknowledge that these are leaders of very successful institutes, and so if they sort of think that things should change, then should be taken seriously, right?
Well, I would also say that even though there may be some issues why some of them may be difficult to execute exactly as recommended, we should take the spirit of these recommendations and try to work in that direction as much as possible. So I fully agree that we shouldn't sort of be too much saying, oh, this doesn't apply to us and this is meant for another purpose. I think these are good recommendations, and we can still coordinate things better, even if we cannot fully take them under one program. Okay, the SciLife faculty concept was already discussed. They want us to sort of work on that, and we'll need to work on that. I'll point out a couple of issues on this research integrity issues, because this is something that when they came to us, that we want to look at research integrity issues at SciLifeLab. Well, we told them, well, that's fine, but this is really an issue which is up to the host universities. They have the legal responsibility, and they have sort of a kind of a deal with all of the issues, and that is the case. But they said that despite of that, you at SciLifeLab should be concerned about this. That there's always a spillover effect. When something happens, this spills over to other entities as well. And we have dedicated national funding from the government for infrastructure maintenance. So we should at least be sure to at least be prepared for that spillage to impact on our infrastructures. And we need education, we need preparedness, we need sort of to consider it, how we can block this, how we can prevent it, how we can manage it to the best of our abilities. And I think we'll bring it up in the infrastructure side more in the future as to how we could deal with this thing. There's a bunch of things that relate to biobanks. We do a lot of research on human specimens. We do a lot of aspects in data security issues, like Bengt was saying. And if you know what happened to the data security issues in the Department of Transportation, so anything like that would be an immediate sort of a major chaos. So let's be prepared, and we'll be back with specific issues on the research integrity. So I'm in retrospect now very happy that they brought it up, and because this also made us to rethink about this issue, even though the formal responsibility for ethical conduct is always at the host universities and their side. Human resources, the career development of the infrastructure people in particular, also for the fellows, I should say, is important, and we'll also need to think about this one. Branding, they mentioned the branding. One aspect that we already discussed was that we should bring the infrastructure fully under the SciLifeLab branding, at least co-branding of SciLifeLab together with the platform names. But also, how could we bring SciLifeLab even more than it is today into the international arena as a strong brand? And that's one reason why this Science and SciLifeLab prize is being held. But there are many other things that we need to act on this one. I need to rush a bit to finish this on time. Innovation, industrial collaborations. Lars, you want to say something about what you thought about their thoughts on that?
No, I think that they re-emphasize something that has been on the agenda for a long time, that there needs to be a better and more open dialogue with people outside of the academic community, and this, our capability to engage in that is of course dependent on like many of the issues that were brought up on, you know, what is SciLifeLab's role in relation to the host universities, and how do the host universities see what SciLifeLab's purpose is in society, or from their perspective. And we're working on now a lot to get the perspective from the other players out there. How does the healthcare industry want to see SciLifeLab? How does the industry want to see SciLifeLab? And how can we best position ourselves to make the most benefit of that? So a lot of good pointers with unclear solutions.
This is also difficult to present to anybody. What is the SciLifeLab industrial collaborative space? Because there's an enormous amount of activities going in various fields, and that's been one of the Lars's challenges, is to build some kind of an understanding of what those are, because they are run through the 4 host universities, and there's a ton of them. And we are already a significant player, but maybe we didn't present it significantly in the IAB report. The clinical collaboration we already discussed, but now at the end, any final comments? I mean, we are at the end of our predicted broadcast to the community, but whatever you still have as comments, please state. And also, now after this event, I mean, the discussion will continue at the management group, at the host universities, elsewhere. So this will be leading to a lot of efforts, and these comments are not just meant to be comments, but we'll actually try to act on them. And send us comments at any point on any of these issues. So if nothing urgent now, otherwise I think we'll bring it to a close, and thank you very much for active engagement in this effort, and we'll be back later on in the year with another community update. So thanks so much.